the idea of this session is to go over some of the stuff we've been having through the support system. With lots of people working from home now, so as you can imagine, like the first couple of weeks of lockdown, we got an awful lot of calls, mainly from IT teams, going, we're trying to make stuff work remotely, and we're finding problems with it. And then we got into the second tranche of calls, which is people had started to work remotely and they were then bumping into difficulties with certain parts of the product and things like that, and having to come up with ways around it. So we've learnt a few things from this. So we'll go over some of those bits and pieces. Also, we have to remember that not everybody has already worked remotely. There are some people that have not come back yet, and my slides were just playing up there, sorry. Some people won't have experienced these problems yet. So what we're going to go over is what's actually supported by Microsoft, because that's key to all of this. Obviously, if Microsoft aren't supporting it, doesn't matter if you can sort of make it work, we can't really assist you with it. So it's got to be a supported method by Microsoft. Then we're going to look at what some of the remote working solutions actually are out there, some of the things you can do. As we've already touched on with things like eRequest and the OCR, some of your internal processes may need to change. So we'll look at some of those things you may need to think about, because obviously people aren't in the office anymore. You can't just trot up the stairs to finance or wherever and get done what you need to get done. And then look over some quick tips and tricks. So these are quick and dirty ones, really. So stopgap measures to get you through till you've got the nice slick solutions in place to help you process more efficiently in this new remote world that we find ourselves in. Okey-dokey. So first of all, what is supported? So this is what it's all going to hang off by Microsoft. Yeah. So this is a direct quote from Microsoft, taken off of their support site. So Microsoft Dynamics GP isn't designed to work in and is not supported in a WAN environment. Great. What's a WAN environment? That's what everybody that's not in IT is now saying. I have no idea. So all the IT guys know, but nobody else does. And of course, we've got a split audience here. So bear with me if you already know all this stuff. So WAN. So what is WAN? WAN means wide area network. Okay, so what's the difference between a wide area network and what I've already got? Well, that's a LAN, and a LAN is a local area network. So when you're in the office on your machine and everything's all connected up nice, that's a LAN, that's a local area network. Everything's on the same network, it's all on the same subnet mask usually. Everything's talking to each other quite nicely, okay? When you take a machine from outside that network or even a machine that was part of that network, take it remotely away from that network location and then connect to that network via a VPN or something like that over an internet. That's no longer part of the LAN, that's now part of the WAN, the wider area network, etc. Okay, so and that's the situation that GP doesn't work in. Now we've had a few clients try this, because rightly so, IT people have thought it communicates via an ODBC data source, it's a client on a machine, surely it should work over a VPN, and well, it kind of does, but, and that's a big but, and we'll get into that in a bit. So here we go. Why does it not work? So this might be a bit techie, but I'll try and keep it a little bit user-friendly on that thing. GP validates data and updates tables as information is entered. Okay, so it does it like this to make the user's experience better and more efficient. So as you're entering in details of a client, it will tell you if they're past credit limits and things like that. It will make suggestions. It will check all these sorts of stuff before you've even hit post and submit and all those kinds of things. So there's constantly information going backwards and forwards between GP and the server, which it's connecting to over that ODBC data source to the SQL Server in the background, which is the relational database. Okay, now a true client server app doesn't do that. A true client server app only does that when you hit submit. So it saves everything up, and then when you hit submit, that's when it goes off and does all its checks and stuff like that. Whereas GP, remember, is doing it all the way along. So there's a lot of information going backwards and forwards all the time. It's not just when you hit that submit button. So that's one of the reasons why it's not particularly good over a WAN, over a VP connection, because of that amount of data constantly going backwards and forwards. And if you interrupt that stream, you're going to have problems. Also, GP has a default cursor size of 25 records. What's the cursor size? Basically, what that means is when GP goes off and retrieves any kind of data from the server, it always brings back the top 25 records, and then the next 25 records, and then the next 25 records. This is so that you're not constantly waiting for data, which is great if you're all on the same LAN and you've got nice network connectivity going on everywhere, because it's bringing back enough information to make searching easier, and you're already laden with this smorgasbord of records that you can pull in and out of. But again, if you're doing that over a VPN, all of a sudden you're bringing unnecessary information through. So you're bringing through larger amounts of information than you would need. Consequently, you're putting pressure on that system, bringing it in over the WAN. So that's another reason why it's not supported in that environment. And the third main reason really is not all GP functionality is wrapped up in SQL. So we've talked or said ODBC data source, SQL Server in the background, it's pushing all the information backwards and forwards by this ODBC data source to SQL. Great. SQL has rollback facilities. That's brilliant, because if we lose a package, we can roll back and stuff like that. So it doesn't really matter. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't actually wrap all of that information in SQL. Some of it is done outside of it, which means if there is a break in the data connection between the SQL Server and the client, you could corrupt and lose data, and there's not always a full rollback facility for it. So again, that's another reason why it's not supported in that WAN environment, like connecting over that VPN to the office, where the client is on your machine at home, VPN to the office, and the servers in the office. So these are the reasons why it doesn't quite work in that environment. Now, having said that, we have had clients that do work that way, but, and this is the big but, they tend to only use it for inquiries. So it's like salespeople and people that are out and about, and they connect up and they just need to do quick inquiries, because at the end of the day, you're pulling information back. You're not sending any information to GP. You're not putting transactional information on. So if it gets lost or corrupted or something like that, there isn't an issue, because you're just pulling information, you're just doing inquiries. So it's kind of okay in that sort of environment, and it will work if you have a seriously beefy internet connection. That's the other proviso on that front. So that's why it doesn't work. So how are we going to get it work? What sort of remote working solutions does it work with? So of course, if you're going to ask Microsoft, the first thing they'll say is, well, use the web client. And the web client's great, at least it is now. Originally, when it was written in Silverlight, it was terribly clunky and not a particularly good bit of kit. The last two iterations of it, so sort of 2016, 2018, it's been rewritten in HTML5, so it's a lot more user-friendly, it's a lot more usable. And it's great, but again, it's only really good for limited use. You can access virtually everything through the web client except VBA. So if you've got a lot of VBA modifications, etc., on your forms and reports, they will not surface in the web client. Okay, but pretty much everything else works fine. And it's great for sort of limited stuff. But if you are doing heavy data input, so you're a purchase ledger clerk sat in there typing in invoice after invoice because you haven't bought OCR yet, then it's not really going to quote with that. It can be done, but it's quite clunky. So there is the web client. It's quite a good solution for most people, but for heavy usage, can struggle a bit. Terminal services, again, another Microsoft technology. So if you ask them as a preference for this kind of thing, oh yeah, terminal services is great. So terminal services basically means rather than having GP on your machine, it sits on a server and everybody remotely logs into that server and basically has a desktop on that server that they use. And because you're remotely logging into that server, you can be doing that from anywhere as long as you've got the right connectivity set up. That server's still on the network, so it's still on the LAN. There's no VPN involved, so you can VPN into your network, connect to that server, and then from that server use GP over terminal services. Great, no problems. That's really good if you've got people doing heavy data usage and inputs and stuff like that. It's really good from an IT point of view as well, because obviously there's less clients to maintain around an office environment. So if you've got 20, 30 people on GP and they're all got it on workstations, actually one terminal server. Obviously, from a support point of view, I'm paranoid about things breaking. I'd never recommend one terminal server. I'd go for at least two, so you've got a backup and you can load balance and switch between them and stuff. But there are people out there using one, and it works fine. As I say, the whole maintenance of that is a lot easier in that respect, and that will work as a remote solution. Non-Microsoft solution, Citrix. Basically, same thing as terminal server, but it's not Microsoft. The difference between Citrix is you can actually do a published application or a published desktop. So a published application would mean that you go into like a site and you just see like a GP logo there, and you click on that and you get GP, or you see a logo for whatever other application you want, or you can do it as a published desktop, which is literally, it looks like a desktop on another machine. That's another good solution. There are some problems with published app. If you think about GP and the way it works, and so if you're using Integration Manager, for instance, you go into GP and then you launch Integration Manager, and you need to keep GP open in the background, and it piggybacks off of that GP session to get all your connection details and things like that. So if you're a published app, when they open up, they can open up in different sessions, so it won't find the GP that you've got open and be able to communicate. There are ways around it, but you know, there are a couple of stumbling blocks if you're going to use those sort of Citrix published app rather than the published desktop. But again, connects into the same way. Citrix have a really nice web portal to get onto their servers and stuff like that you can use again. So that's a good solution. VPN and then RDP. So we said VPN, you can't do it. You can do a VPN if you're not launching the client on your desktop. So there is a thing called Remote Desktop Protocol from Microsoft, and what a lot of people are doing is they're having a VPN connecting to the office and then launching RDP. You should just go into the little search bar on your machine, type RDP, and you'll find it, Remote Desktop Protocol, and then using that to go to their machine or another machine in the office, and then it's like working in that machine, because that machine in the office has got GP installed on it, so it's on the LAN. The bit in the GP is not coming down the internet connection. And you're saying, but all this stuff's still coming to me via the internet, surely it's going to lose. It's not actually sending the information. With all of these things like terminal services and Citrix and RDP, it's not sending all that information to your machine. It's literally sending the equivalent of a screenshot loads of times. It's not actually sending the actual data, so all you're going to lose is the image. You're not losing data itself. Okay. Right, Azure hosting. We've heard of Azure servers already today with the Kovac stuff, but Azure hosting is an option. So because it's a Microsoft solution, it's using SQL Server and things like that in the background. If you're on the later releases of Dynamics GP, you can actually put it up in the cloud on Azure servers. You have to be careful with this kind of stuff, because putting it on Azure servers means that Microsoft look after certain things, but they don't look after everything. Your IT still has to be responsible for a lot of things to do with it. It's not a fully hosted solution. It's just their kit in the cloud, and you put your software on it. Simple as that. But because it's in the cloud, you are then accessing it via web gateways, etc. It's all together in the same place. It can communicate effectively, but you can get to it through the web. So that's another option that's available to you. If you want less hassle, you could go to a specialist hosting provider. Now we've teamed up with one called Kinetech, and there's a link there. You can get to it via our website, and we've teamed up with them specifically with this in mind. Because of the current situation, there are going to be a lot more people thinking, well, maybe it's the time to now go fully hosted. So we're doing specific deals aimed around getting people into a hosted environment with them very quickly. The advantages of this is they look after all the backups, all the maintenance. You never have to buy another server, all those good things. So it's no longer capital expenditure, and it all sits, again, in the cloud. Well, in a hosting environment, so they have all the servers, you access it via the web. So it's, again, your software on somebody else's kit, but actually this time they're doing all the hard work. They're looking after everything for you. And these guys are specialists in GP. So where you go to some hosting providers, they say they host anything, but they don't actually know GP. These guys all know GP. Most of them have worked at GP resellers. I know quite a few of them. So they know the specific intricacies and issues you will have with GP, and if you start talking GP at them, you're not going to get a glazed look. So they're very good. We've set up this specific deal with them at the moment. I think it works out roughly about £40 a month per user to put everything up in the cloud, which if you break it down, sort of less than a cup of Starbucks coffee a day per user. So it's something worth considering, and again, we've dropped our consultancy prices to get it up and get it in there quicker as well, because obviously you don't want to do that sort of thing in 2 years' time. Now's the time to do it if you're looking at that. Right, okie dokie. So those are some of the sort of supported ways of accessing GP remotely, getting it in the cloud, or accessing what's on your system at home. That's all very well and good. You get to it now, but now you've got some problems because you're not in the office. Okay, you can't go and sit on the end of people's desks. So you are going to have to look at some of your processes and have a look at what needs to be changed. So basically, this is my thoughts on it. Any process that involves sitting on the end of somebody else's desk will need to be changed. And I find that particularly hard because that was my favourite way of getting anything done in the office, just go and find out who's responsible to sit on the end of their desk until they do what you want them to. You can't do that anymore. And quite frankly, Teams and stuff like that is very good for connectivity, but people can switch you off. They can't sort of, they can make you go away. So we need to look at these processes and see what we can change and what we're going to have to look at. So approvals always used to be this piece of paper. Is that okay, boss? Sign that. I've been around companies still using those old rubber stamps with the little wheels on the bottom where you change the date and all that kind of stuff, which are fun, and I loved them as a kid, but actually in this kind of situation, they're no good to you. So the whole approval process. So we're looking at things like e-request. Are you going to go down that route? Or invoice approvals. There are some workflows and stuff like that in Great Plains that can be used. I'll show my age now, sorry, Dynamics GP. And that whole process, it involves talking to people, sitting with people. We're going to need to move it online somehow. So that's one of the things you're going to need to look at. Check batches. Oh yeah, actually, are we still printing out manual checks? Have we got something where people need to sign it off on a book? Have we got pre-printed check stationery? So that's a process we're going to have to look at. How are we going to move around that? We can use back CFT, all sorts of other pieces, document scanning. So I know of several companies that use document scanning, and actually what they're doing at the moment is one person has to go into the office every week, check the mail, scan all the mail in, and then email it out to the relevant people, and then they go home. So actually, are we looking at moving more towards OCR and other measures of doing that kind of stuff? Is there something else we're going to need to do around that piece? Okay. Anything that involves printing or headed paper, you can't expect people to print out reams and reams of invoices from their little HP printer that they've got at home, because quite frankly their ink will run out, and if I know HP, they won't send you the ink batch quickly enough. So anything that involves printing, we're going to have to think about that. Or can we move away from the paper full stop? Can we move to an email or electronic form of it? Do we even need the paper? Can we not just store it somewhere as a text file or something along those lines? And then again, headed paper. So obviously the pre-printed check stationery, yeah, we can't really do that. We'd have to go in the office and do that. Or do you really want to be sending pre-printed check stationery home with someone? That's not really a good idea. So that needs to go electronic, needs to go EFT or batches. But things like invoices and stuff like that that we were sending out, you might have had, we all know that you can put an image in Report Writer in GP, but it looks a bit horrid and clunky. Do we need to start looking at better ways of doing that so that we can do it electronically and that kind of stuff? We don't need that pre-printed paper anymore. And my personal favourite, and the issue that vexes us most in support, is finding the IT guy to get access to SQL Server. So most of you will have come across this problem at some point with whatever finance system you're looking after, where the bit we deal with through the front end can't take it any further, and we need to get into the back end to look at SQL, free up a stuck batch. That's the most common one. Look at the status of something, maybe clear out a few users, all those kind of stuff. But the IT guys now are the busiest people on the face of the planet. They've had every single user now wants to work from home. Everybody wants a laptop. Everybody wants remote access. They are absolutely swamped. So getting hold of that IT guy, especially now you can't just go down to the dark, dingy basement where most IT guys are kept and sit on the end of their desk and say, can you do this for me? Getting hold of them is really hard. So actually, how do we get past that as an issue? So these are some of the things you're going to need to think about process-wise going forward. You need to have them on a bit of a checklist. How are we going to process with these in the future? So I've got some thoughts on that. Here we go. Things to make life easier. Now these are quick and dirty. Most of these are not long-term solutions. These are things you can think about doing now in order to get past some of these hurdles and stuff like that. Obviously long-term solutions would be like implement e-request if you haven't done already, implement OCR, move across to some other form of system that's going to allow your approvals to move through, etc. But these are the quick and dirty solutions until you get those in. So first things first, switch off all the posting reports. So I don't know if you're like me, but whenever you post anything in GP, there's half a ton of reports pop up, posting reports. There's 3 or 4 for each transaction you post, and most of these are set to come up to printer and things like that by default. On a lot of sites, I've been on site where you sit there, you post a transaction, and then the printer starts whirling away in the corner for the next 5 minutes. So actually, do you need all of these? These can all be reprinted at any point in time. So if you're going to set up posting, you can switch them off. Now, I'm going to flip over to my GP. On Microsoft Shuffle. Here we go, Microsoft Dynamics GP. Hopefully you can all see that, and that's all work to treat. I'll go to administration. We're going to set up. Okay, we don't want system. We don't want company. There we go, posting. And we come into series post. Okay, so if we've got purchasing, for instance, every time we're putting a purchase order on, we're getting an awful lot of transactions coming through. So as you can see here, actually this bit down the bottom is the bit you want. And you can see every time you put one of these things through, at this point in time, it's popping up and ask a question. So if you want to give people the ability to choose whether they're printing these things or not, that's the one you want. That tick box there under the question mark, and then they get the choice of whether it goes to screen, goes anywhere else or whatever. You might not want them at all. You can untick everything. You see there's an awful lot of reports down there. Okay. You can send it to screen. Okay. You can send it to printer, which is where most people seem to have it as a default, or you can send it to file. So if you're feeling like, well, I'm not ready to kind of ditch all these reports completely straight away, actually send them to file, set it up on this one, and you put in the file path there and send it to a location on the server. You can store them there and then people can get them later. But that's my first recommendation, is switch off some of all those reports that are coming up on a regular basis every time that you're printing. So set up posting. And as I say, you can actually go into reports and you can reprint all your posting reports anyway, so they're not lost. Okay, back to the slideshow. Death by PowerPoint. Here we go. Quick approvals emails. So as I say, we've looked at e-requests. We've got these approvals, invoice approvals, and accrual. Maybe you haven't got that set up yet, right? It's going to be a couple of weeks before we can get it in, or maybe it's got to now go through some purchasing process, and you've got to get the right people to sign it off, but they're all furloughed. So actually, you want some kind of quick stopgap in between times. Use the batch edit list and the cash requirements report. So what I'll do is I'll go back into my GP. Microsoft Shuffle's quicker this time, so it's the last thing I was in. Right. And what I'm talking about here is if you go into any kind of posting report, you've got a batch edit list in batches. So where are we at the moment? Let's have a look at a purchasing batch. So let's go into purchasing, batches, select batch, here we go. Right, so this batch's only got one transaction in it. But obviously what you've got up here is print. Now, this comes up a lot in support when you get stuck batches and things aren't posting, and we tell people go and print a batch edit list because it'll tell you what's wrong with it, and 9 times out of 10 they go, how do I do that? What's a batch edit list? Didn't know it existed. Really useful piece of functionality, batch edit list. So if we click on print when you're in a batch, you get this screen up. I've got the center screen one. So you've got options here. This is templates. This is Word templates. We'll get onto them in a bit. Or you've got the old standard version here, which was the old report writer version. If I send that to screen, okay. So let's open up my Word. That's the Word template version of them. You can see that's everything that was going to be in a batch. If there was a problem with the batch, it would tell me here. It would say, you know, errors, distributions don't match, it's trying to post to a closed period, all those kinds of stuff. So really good from a trouble point shooting point of view. But what you've got is now everything in that batch on an electronic document. You can email that off to someone and say, is this all right? Am I happy with that? Can you approve it? Okay, so you can have like a quick and dirty approval system without having to change anything. The other option on there, of course, is if we come into screen and we go standard, we get the old report writer version of it, which is even easier because actually if you get that one to screen, there's a send to button here, and you just click that and it will send the whole thing to someone as an email anyway. Okay, so you can send it off, put a little note on it, just okay, yeah, great, and have a kind of quick and dirty approval process until you get something more in place. Obviously, doesn't really work with payment batches because payment batches, check batches and stuff, you want to be able to see what's in it before you build the batch and stuff, what it's going to bring in. You might want, because people might want to say, oh no, I don't want that in the batch, and remove that, and etc. So there's a little known report in the system that nobody I know of actually uses, but it pretty much does that for you. So if you go into reports under purchasing and under analysis, this is why no one knows it's there because it's not the most sensible place to put it. You've got the cash requirements report, and if you pick up the cash requirements report, and I'll just put that, you pretty much put in the same sort of parameters you'd put in if you were building a check batch. But I shall print that one and print that one to screen. And there you go. Again, it's basically saying these are all the outstanding things that I would want to pay off. So again, you can print this one out, email it to whoever needs to authorize that kind of stuff and say, this is what's going to go in the payment run. Do you want all of this stuff back. So they can come back and say, no, don't want that one, that one, that one, and that one. Great. Then you can go off and build your payment batch, but use edit checks because you can be more selective about it, and therefore you haven't had to have that whole approval process. So there you go. Batch edit lists and cash requirement reports, can use them as like a quick and dirty approval process until you've got something nice and slick in. Okay. Next one, workflows. So later releases of GP have workflows in them. Early releases have them too, but they were not very good, so I wouldn't bother. Later releases, 2016, 2018, they've got workflows in them. You can set up approvals and things with those workflows if you want to. They're easy enough to get to. They are quite limited in their structure and what you can and can't approve. But if you want to have a look at those, it's just under administration, and you've got setup, and then there's workflows. There we go. Workflow maintenance. And these are all the bits and pieces you can put on. So you can set up a batch approval workflow, approvals for creation of vendors, that kind of stuff, whatever. They're not as in-depth as what you get through invoice approvals and e-request, and can be a bit clunky and are a little bit limited, but they are there. You can set them up. Okay. All right. So this is sounds a bit like a no-brainer really, but a lot of people don't do it. If you've got large reporting requirements and you've got reports that are going to take up a lot of time, etc., whether they be management reporter reports or ones through GP, they take a long time to run. Schedule them to run out of hours. So management reporter, you can schedule reports and stuff. GP, you can't really schedule reports, but you can. Again, there's old functionality in the system that allows you to write keystroke macros, which is way back from the sort of version 4 days of Dynamics GP, and it's all still there. So basically, you record yourself running the report, and you save this as a macro, and you do the macros in the correct way. You can do it so it will copy in your login details to GP, and then you can attach that macro to a batch file in Windows, which Windows can schedule. So you have it at 8 o'clock at night, this batch file kicks off, which logs into GP, opens up GP, runs that report, saves that report to a network drive somewhere, and then close GP down. If you want to know how to do that, in the Integration Manager manual, if you've got that PDF, I think it's chapter 13, there's a whole section on scheduling macros out of hours, because you can do it for integrations as well. So that's quite useful. Schedule them out of hours, take some of the load off of what's going on. Set up EFT, electronic payments, BACS, all those kinds of stuff. I was talking to a charity client last week, and they are now giving out payments to people for COVID-19. They were a charity that sort of helped less well off with payments for sort of food and accommodation and stuff like this. And they used to just manually do checks. Unfortunately, they've been swamped with COVID-19, and they're now into a big initiative with their local councils and things like that, which it means they're being absolutely heavily inundated. So obviously it was the best solution for them is set up electronic payments. So you've got two options really. There's the standard EFT that's already in GP, or you can use our electronics payment module and get those everything going through BACS and electronic rather than pre-printed stationery, manual checks, all those kinds of stuff. Use document attach. So we saw a little bit of document attach in Colin's e-request demo, but it is really quite funky. You can add image files and stuff now. It's gone are the days where it was just a clippy note on the note field. What you've got now with document attach is the ability to put on a whole kind of history with that attachment. So again, because you need everything in one place and people aren't necessarily around to ask, it's best give them all that information up front. Put all that information onto documents, whether they're on invoices or on purchases, whatever they're on, etc. So document attached, nice and easy to use. So it comes off of all the note fields and things like that. You can do it at batch level. You can do it at transaction level, etc. So if I come back and I found a transaction I was playing with earlier, and you see you've just got this attach button up here. If you haven't got the attach button, you literally go on the notes field and you go to the clippy there. They both get you to the same place. It'll open up document attach, and you can see what I've done in this one is I've already got an attachment, and if I want to add another attachment, say I've been emailing around a whole chain of stuff about this particular transaction with people and I want to know what's going on, and because people aren't going to be available to go out and ask, literally you can just come down here, come into wherever you've done it, and see, I've already got that one on there, so it's recognised that. Do I want to save it or do I want to replace it? Yeah, I'm going to replace it with a later image. It's quite clever. It will give you a whole history of whether they've been deleted or not, what's been added on. You can stick multiple stuff in through here. You can now see that whole email chain nicely attached to that document. So while there aren't people to ask, get as much information on those. If there's even something slightly weird happened with a transaction or a batch or an approval, get it on there. And when we were emailing those edit lists around earlier and those whole cash requirement reports, that email chain, literally in your Outlook or whatever, file, save as, and then stick that email train onto the batch or onto the document so someone can see it there as the quick and dirty approval chain. Now, if you're very lucky, you've got some of our kit and you've got this, which is a drag and drop. So rather than having to scroll out and browse out and find something, if you've got that, you can just drag it off, drop it on there, and it attaches it nice and easy. Simple little bit of kit, but use that functionality. Okay. Right. Okay, here we go. So that was document attach. Use the notes field, same sort of thing basically. That little yellow notes field, they're everywhere. Get some information on those transactions. The less chasing people around the office you do, or even if it is remotely, the better. Put the information there in the first place. So that, and if everyone knows to look there, then you can cut down on those delays, etc. MR, so if you're using Management Reporter, you can set up to publish your MR reports to an external web repository. Now, not everybody's comfortable doing this, but obviously you have to have security in place around that external website link. You don't want just anybody willy-nilly coming in. But once they're there, you can pick them up with the web viewer. The web viewer is free and you have unlimited licenses to that in Management Reporter. So rather than people having to actually dial into your system, whether it's on a terminal server or whether they're VPNing in or whatever way they're getting in, it could just be via a website. They can pick up the reports. They can't generate them there. They can only pick up ones that have been pre-generated. So someone's got to do them, but you can schedule them and you could have them pushed straight to that site automatically, and people can then just go and pick them up. So again, they're not using those resources on the system, hogging that. It's just through the web client. They can pick it up nice and easy. So that's another quick tip on that one. Headed paper. So we briefly touched on Word templates and stuff earlier. You can use Word templates. They are better than the original report writer. I did this on a typewriter kind of report. Or my personal favorite would be Spindle. Reason for that is the Word templates can be a little bit clunky. So when we did that report, you noticed I had the Word version of it come up. You can actually get in and modify them as Word templates quite easily. So if I go into administration and I go into reports, I believe that's where it is. Yep, there it is. So you've got template maintenance there, and you've got an unlimited number of these templates you can put in the system. So you can have a look out there, and you can see what reports are that you'd want to modify and do in a Word template form. So let's pick up a purchasing report. Let's have a, oh no, let's go to sales. Go to sales. All right, and have a look at all the original reports are in here. And oh, let's statement. That looks good. So I have my statement, and I'm going to select that. There we go. So I've got my statement now, and it's got a little asterisk by it, which means it's an original report. I'm going to modify that. That's great. Oh, won't let me do it. So you can't actually break what's there. Right? What you need to do is create a new one from the existing template being that one. Create. Okay, excellent. I've now got a copy of it to all intents and purposes, which I can modify to my heart's content. So open up in Word. That looks easy. How do I modify that? You can't. First things first, you've got to actually go and put it into developer mode. Okay, so at the word developer, everyone start thinking, it's a bit more complicated than I thought, but there you go. It's in developer mode now, so I've now got more options which allow me to start modifying this report. There is one other thing that's missing from my machine because I rebuilt it yesterday and haven't put it back on yet. You should see in developer mode the GP logo up here, which allows you to pull in fields from the report writer report and drag them into GP. That's not on mine because I haven't got the GP Word template plugin on my machine at the moment. So if you go into develop mode, you see that. That'll be why you can't effectively modify it without there. But that's another way, and it's fairly easy, as you see, to put in image files and stuff like that and make a fairly decent go of it. It can be quite complicated with the table structure in there. So personally, I prefer the way that Spindle does it, but that's horses for courses. And again, if you're going to use Spindle, you can have it produce headed paper around whatever you're emailing out and add terms and conditions and all those other good things to it as well. So those are other options for you. Okay, so that was use of Word templates and stuff. Last but not least, well, not even last, I've got another one on the list off this, business alerts. So you can't keep an eye on your colleagues because you're not in the same place. You're in your kitchen, they're in their bedroom, somebody else is working out of a nice little purpose-built home office, and we're all jealous of those. But you can't see what they're doing. When you're in an office, you know roughly what's going on around you. You can't anymore. There's business alerts in GP. So you can set these up quite happily. They're a little bit on the techie side. So if you want some help with this, it might be worth getting in touch with your account manager and saying what kind of alerts you want set up. But as you see in setup, you've got business alerts here. It's through a wizard. I'm going to create a new alert. Already it's starting to ask me kind of techie-ish things, but I'm actually interested in information that's on that company. Give it an ID. Yeah, really imaginative with these kinds of things. And as you can see, start seeing the series and the tables and things like that. So, for instance, I might want to know if any sales came in over 500 quid or something like that. So I come down and I would find the, not purchasing, or sales table. And then we'd have a look at probably the work or open transactions. We go and find those from here. RM open, there we go, RM open, insert that. So that's the table I'm looking at. Great. As you can see, you need to know a little bit of the background of the product to do this. And then it's building up information. So I can, from stuff from the RM table, I can look at the column name and I'm going to say, I want to have the original transaction amount. So when stuff goes into this, I don't want to know about it. Ooh. Again, it helps if you know what the columns are. So I'm going to add that in the bottom and it's starting to build up a query, and I want to know when it's greater than, and then a constant value, so 500. And when you're putting values into this, it's always stored it with 5 zeros after it. There you go. So basically, I've said when anything hits that table with an original transaction amount over £500, I want to know about it. Click next, and then we're setting up who's it going to be to. So what am I going to do? I'm going to email it. I'm going to email it to me, or I'm going to send it to a user ID. I'm going to put some text around that. We can add in multiple recipients and stuff like that. And you get the idea. You can build up an alert. So all of these things that you think you want to know about, and you usually rely on your colleagues coming and telling you, or just picking up on the office, you can set up these kind of alerts on a lot of things, and now it's automatically going to send that information to you, so you can know what's going on around the rest of the team. Okay, so that's business alerts. Okay, my last top tip is use Power BI dashboards. Okay, so if you're already using Microsoft Office, you've probably got the freebie version of Power BI, etc. There is a bunch of reports for GP already done in it, which you can just put in. So I'll just find mine. That's what they look like. That's the out-of-the-box GP reports. So that's all going straight over the web. And as you see, these are all interactive. So these are the sales reports. I can go, I'm interested in, what's that big circle there? Obviously, American data, unfortunately. And they're all interactive. So it's changing the data on it. So if people are just doing basic inquiries, I just want access to that sort of level of data. Again, you can do this. It can go on the web. They're not going through the main system. You can drill down on this stuff. You can get pretty much down to transactional information, and it's all there already, waiting for you to play with it. And say it's all interactive. So that's quite a nice toy. It requires a little bit of setup, but again, it's taken away from the traffic, etc. So I realise I'm probably running out of time a bit. So my last but not least thing to show you is the hand of support. So, you know, I remember I said my favourite bugbear is that not being able to find an IT people. Well, we've thought about this and we've come up with our own product. The developers have decided to call it the hand of support. I think they've watched too much Game of Thrones personally, but there you go. What it does is this allows us through the front end to do some of those stuff that we normally have to find IT guys to do through the back end. So where you'd be able to access it is through additional NBS support tool, and this is the Help About Microsoft Dynamics screen that has all its version in it, so it's only accessible through there. And it displays a whole load of tasks, which I will show you how you get to in a moment. And we can then enter these tasks and run these tasks and get the results back. These tasks are in our Nolan Cloud Services. We can upload them in there. So this is basically SQL scripts, etc., that we've broken down into parsable phrases that we can then run. But it's all controlled by sites here. So those scripts aren't always available to your site, so we have to create you as a site and then give that site access to those scripts, and then it's all password protected and take away at the end of the day. So those scripts aren't permanently there for you. There'll be a case of when support dials in, we say, right, we need to do this, we'll make that script available to you, password protected. We can go in through go to assist, run that, get the results, great, and then we haven't had to bother IT. So as you can see, this is the way we build up one of these tasks. I can actually show you that, I believe. Let's go into my Nolan Cloud Services, sign in, right? And we create companies in here. Here are the tasks. And here's the common one, stuck batches. So literally we've just cut up a parameter. Here's the SQL script. That's going to be available to us there. It's going to ask us what that variable is when we run it through the front end of yours. We put it in. The results come up on screen. No need to bother IT. And we can just load this up with all the scripts that we want. Now, We're currently testing this in support. It's not available just yet. I just wanted to show it to you because I wanted you to realize that we've realized there's a problem there. We're trying to address it. We're currently testing it. It worked brilliantly on all the developers' machines, but everything does. We're now trying to break it in support. Once we've got past breaking it, we'll be looking for clients that are prepared to test this in a live environment with us. So hopefully that will resolve some of those problems of finding the IT people and to have a quicker turnaround on the end of support calls, etc.